Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another Hit Save Indie interview podcast, videocast, whatever you want to call it. Today, I'm here with Alex Rushdy from 13 AM Games. Hello, Alex.
Hello.
Do you want to introduce yourself a bit? Who you are and what you do at 13 AM Games?
Sure. Yeah. So I've kind of got two major jobs at 13am Games. I'm the CEO, so I'm in charge of kind of business development and direction, and I'm the creative director. That's project dependent, but most recently I was creative director on Dawn of the Monsters.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll dive into Dawn of the Monsters a bit later in the show here. But first, I want to dive into who you are and how you got to where you are, and then we'll dive into 13 AM Games a little more as well. So, how did you get started in game development? How did you get to where you are right now?
So I kind of stumbled into it. I didn't intend to go into game development. I studied visual art and design with the intent to go into film and video production. And I did film and video production for about a year. I wasn't that hot on it. And I'd always been interested in video games. I always loved video games, but I wasn't really, I'm from a visual art and design background. I didn't want to learn programming. It wasn't something that felt really jived with my skill set. And then I found out that, like, oh no, you don't have to be a programmer to work in video games. There are so many other jobs, and designer is one of them. And at the time, I took a gap year. I was living in the Czech Republic. I was volunteering there at an international school, and when would that have been? 2012, 2012, 2013, and I had kind of grown disillusioned with the current state of video games. I think that was the year that E3 had, I want to say, 6 kind of gray brown military shooters as the standout titles. And I was just like, man, the hobby was clearly growing away from my taste and interest.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. I remember that time period as well. It was very gray
it was a dark
and
time.
dark
Yeah.
brown. Yeah, it was a dark time for sure.
Um, and that's when I kind of got the idea. Well, like, okay, if I'm gonna complain about the video games I don't like, maybe I could try to work and make video games I do like. So I applied to study in a postgrad game design program in Toronto. Met a bunch of other extremely talented people in that program, and together we kind of founded a mock company that we called 13am Games. We did a game jam. We created a very early prototype of our first game, Runbow, and it garnered enough traction and attention that our professors and the college were like, you guys should finish this game. We'll help you out. Like, we'll give you office space for a year. Um, we'll give you computers that you can use for the year. Finish the game. So we finished it, with the intention of, okay, we'll finish the game and then we'll have a resume to go get real jobs. But the game kind of got picked up by, Nintendo caught wind of it. We reached out to them to show them the game, and at that time, with the Wii U, it was like kind of exactly what they were looking for, something that shows off the Wii U hardware. It was like a 9-player game, couldn't do anywhere else, and it was part of their kind of burgeoning at the time eShop initiative. They had this branding for indies called Nindies. We were among the first Nindies that they ever had, so it kind of worked out perfectly for us in that we were able to get a lot of coverage and support from Nintendo. And the game, it was a Wii U exclusive. It didn't make a ton of money, but it made enough that we were able to keep making games. And here we are, some 8 years later.
And Runbow, was that ported to the Switch as well?
Yeah, after the Wii U, we ported it to the PC, Xbox, 3DS, and then Switch and PS4 shortly after that. So
So
pretty much everything.
Yeah, you're on all platforms. So
Yeah.
what was that process like? You got a game released on the Wii U. You got Nintendo's eyes on you, essentially. How did that feel? That was your first game. How did that feel?
It was amazing. It was pretty overwhelming. Certainly not what any of us expected. You know, it definitely felt like we were getting a ton of traction. Right, that's the way I like to describe it. Is we're getting a lot of forward traction and momentum, which was really great and pretty intense. We were all pretty fresh out of college at the time. We worked ourselves to the bone to get that game out in time. Our industry likes to condemn crunch from the big guys, but we like to forget about it or pretend it doesn't exist with the little guys, when in reality, that's where I think like 90% of major crunching happens. We worked ourselves raw on that damn game to get it finished. Thankfully, we don't do that anymore, but
that's good. That's good.
We the reason we could do it is because we were all so excited about it, because we all owned it, right? It was our game. We weren't working for someone else's company. It was our game. It was our company, and we believed in it. So yeah, it was pretty incredible and pretty overwhelming for us.
That's awesome. So, how did you go from Runbow to your future titles? What was the kind of the genesis of your next title?
So, the thing about our studio is we all came from very different backgrounds, and none of us really had experience managing a business. So we completed Runbow, and I think that we were expecting it to be a Shovel Knight success. It wasn't a Shovel Knight success, but by the metrics of like any other reasonably minded indie studio, it was pretty darn good. Especially over the lifetime of the game, it's made a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
The problem for us was twofold. One, it didn't make all of its money right at the start, so we couldn't just be like, okay, we have this huge chunk of change, let's put it into a new game. And the other was that like we didn't know how to structure a business, so we didn't want to get pigeonholed into what to do next. We weren't sure what to do next, so we started pitching for a lot of projects that were, you know, pretty much above our pay grade. We kind of like, for a while, we kind of floundered, and we didn't really have a good idea of what to build next, until eventually we just said, okay, let's come up with a cool mechanic. Let's prototype the mechanic, and then let's try to get government funding. And if that's not enough, try to get a publisher on board to build the game. And so that mechanic was initially about magnetism and having like a 2D platformer built around magnetism. And we showed it to Nintendo, and they were like, "Yeah, this is cool, but like, have you heard of Teslagrad?" And Teslagrad is like a 2D platformer about magnetism. So then we were all like, "Shit, they're right. We got to rethink this." So then we started to play around with the idea of, instead of it being magnets, it being a kind of like an energy tether. And we found out this really cool control scheme where you could have a really precise method of targeting objects and enemies with a energy tether, and either grabbing them or moving yourself forward and swinging around like Spider-Man. And eventually that turned into Double Cross, which we released with Graffiti Games in really, really early 2019. I think it was like a January release. And we ended up kind of turning that into a bit of a mix of 2D action platformer meets adventure game. It's a very interesting game, but it didn't do very well. And I think part of that is because it was such a bizarre mix of concepts. And a lot of that came down to us kind of throwing everything in but the kitchen sink into the design. but we learned a lot from it, and we were able to build on it in a lot of ways. And so for our next title, we went back to an early concept that we had about a giant kaiju fighting game, and we re-envisioned it as a co-op title and built Dawn of the Monsters. And that's become one of our most critically acclaimed games that we've put out. A much more focused and kind of realized vision and design. But we started that in, I'd say, mid 2019, early 2019. And then we got Way Forward on board with the project. And, then COVID happened, and bing, bang, boom. Like 3 years later, almost, we were able to get it out back in March.
Well, so let's dive into that a bit. So you got Way Forward as the publisher, is that right?
Yeah.
And your team is everyone based out of Toronto, or how does that work?
Pretty much. So before the pandemic, we actually had office building, like an actual physical office here in Toronto. And in 2020, we got rid of that after we realized that, this pandemic's it's not just gonna be a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So we transitioned to work from home. And so while the majority of people are in Toronto or in the GTA, there are actually, I think there's just one, our CFO, Tom, he's up in Sudbury. Because basically during the pandemic, he was like, you know what? I'm going to buy a house in a place where a house is affordable. And he left Toronto.
It's not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea at all, in my opinion. But so, I'm still here in Toronto.
How was that transition from being in the office during the week and working on things and being with colleagues and kind of working off each other and iterating quickly? How was that transition to a complete remote only?
I think that it was very difficult, but I also feel like we probably had an easier transition than most companies and industries. We were already set up over a network, as far as submitting builds and pushing and pulling and sharing content. So that was already set up. The main challenge was in how do we change how we communicate as a group? And the tool that was super helpful for us in making that transition pretty smoothly was Discord. Whereas a lot of companies use Zoom and stuff. I kind of hate Zoom. I don't really like Google Hangouts. I mean, I like Google Meetings a little bit better than Zoom, I guess. But anyways, it was weird, right? There was all these different tools, and the one that worked the best for us was Discord, because we could basically set up virtual meeting rooms and be like, hey, everyone come to this meeting room, or hey, I'm going to meet with design in the design room. The artists are going to chat in the art room, and tech is going to meet in the tech room and talk to production or whatever. And at any time we could share screens, we could do all sorts of stuff. That really helped. So I mean, that first thing was figuring out how to communicate with each other as an organization and keep that communication clean. We also use Slack still, which we were already using. And then the other one was just on the more personal side, getting used to the idea of working in my own home. Probably, I don't know if you can see it, but my bed is right over there. And when we started work from home, I would have dreams where the entire company was in my bedroom working. And I was like, oh, geez, this is going to take some getting used to.
Yeah, I mean, you essentially invited everyone into your bedroom when you have video calls in your bedroom. I'm down here in my basement, so I invite everyone over to my basement, essentially. This is where I do my work, and also here's my couch, and all my video games are over there.
I see a nice big CRT.
Yeah, I see you got a CRT behind you too.
Of course, a man of taste.
I actually got one, another Sony Trinitron on the floor as well.
I've got a Trinitron next to this one sideways, so I can play like shmups and stuff. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I totally see what you mean. The transition happened for us as well. So I work at VMware, a large IT company, and of course everyone just turned over to remote. I had been working remote for a while already, so it wasn't a big change for me, but it was a big change to have everyone else be remote as well, for sure.
Yeah, and I had worked when I was working in video production. I was working by sole proprietor. I was a sole proprietor, so I would just do everything by myself. And I ended up actually renting office space. This was back in like 2011 or something. I rented office space, so that I would actually have to go to work and keep it out of my home. And that's one of the things that I learned was like really important. Is like, because I'm in game development, I actually have a pretty beefy PC, right? I could run all sorts of PC games, but I never play games on my computer because this space, when I'm sitting in this chair, I'm in work mode.
Yeah.
And if I want to relax, I can either like sit on my bed and play my CRTs, or I have another room that has like a couch with an HD TV, and it's like I'm in relax mode. Keep them very separate, because if they start to meld together, things get bad for me.
Yep, totally get that. Totally get that. Yeah. So, you worked through the pandemic on Dawn of the Monsters, and then you released it when?
In March. I think it was March 15th of this year.
Awesome. So what was the reception like?
The reception was, so it's interesting. I mean, overwhelmingly positive. People really loved the game, and a lot of people said a lot of really nice things. A lot of things, when you're developing a game, you're never sure if what you're making is going to resonate with people or not in the way you intend it. It doesn't matter if you think it's good or not. It's just like, will people actually like get it? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people did, because we were trying to, like, I love side-scrolling beat-em-ups, but I always felt that the evolution of side-scrolling beat-em-ups kind of stopped when 3D beat-em-ups like Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden started to come out. And I was like, why can't a side-scrolling beat-em-up have the depth and nuance of that kind of combat? And that's what we did with Dawn of the Monsters. It plays more like Bayonetta than it does like Final Fight. And people picked up on that, and they really appreciated the amount of content we added to try to differentiate it from other beat 'em ups on the market. And some people even said, "Oh, this is like the next step for beat 'em ups." I was like, "Ooh, I like the sound of that." So that was all good. However, it released in March 15th of 2022, which means it was like, I want to say 2 weeks after Elden Ring. So getting anyone to pay attention to this game was an absolute nightmare. Really difficult to get people to even just like review it on time. Super tough, super. And of course, I mean, we had our core of fans that were like ready for the game when it launched and stuff, but getting outside of that into the general gaming, like there's some beat 'em ups that have done numbers this year, but it's like Ninja Turtles, right? Ninja Turtles is a multi-billion-dollar franchise. Of course, they were in, of course, IGN reviewed them. Getting IGN to review our game was like, it's impossible. So it was a bit of a challenging launch from that perspective as well. So critically, really, really great. But we weren't able to get as much of a response from the general gaming public that we'd hoped we would get.
So I've been trying this out for the past week, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. And one of the things that I really like about it is the story itself. It's not a regular beat 'em up story. And very sci-fi, lots of kaijus, and hey, just fight monsters, and you're a monster yourself. You can control monsters and beat up other monsters. I mean, that's really freaking cool. So I've been having a blast with it. I'm not the best at beat 'em ups, and it took me a while to understand the controls, and then to actually utilize the augments that you have in there as well.
Mhm.
And I really like that mechanic, the augment mechanic, because it definitely adds kind of a personal touch to how you play, with those augments there. So and then upgrades and skins and all that good stuff. But the augments definitely made a big difference compared to a bunch of other beat 'em ups that I've played lately.
Thank you. Yeah, that was another key factor for us in designing this game. Was, I mean, there's a whole like philosophical discussion about difficulty in video games and all that stuff. Um, and like, I wouldn't say I'm entirely opposed to the idea of like difficulty settings, but I always think there's something elegant about when a game can try to conform to what the player wants to do and let them, because like a difficulty setting, it might be like, okay, we'll just reduce the health of enemies. But like if a player struggles with the idea of dodging or parrying, it doesn't matter if the enemies are low health, they're still going to get hit. So that's one of the reasons we included augments. Is not only is it fun to like build different types of characters, but you can kind of self-identify, oh man, I keep running out of rage or health or whatever. You can be like, okay, well, I'm going to build my kit to deal with that issue, right? And I think that was, I'm pretty happy with how that turned out, and I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed playing around with those.
Yeah, it's super fun. I finished the first Toronto, not mission, but chapter. So I finished that
Nice.
yesterday. And as I was playing through, I got because you get graded after every level as well, and you get graded throughout the levels. And at first, it was just abysmal, of course. But then as I was getting closer to the end, it was like S plus, and then I think the last one, it was like an F, because I was too slow. But it was really fun, and I like that the boss battle mechanic as well, because it's vastly different. It's not just a strong boss that you need to beat, but you have a lot of different elements to the boss, things that they do, the bosses, things they do, and special attacks that you need to be on the lookout for. It has a lot of depth. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it.
That's great to hear. Glad.
So I know you're a big fan of big monsters. I saw you have a collection of Godzilla VHS tapes.
Yep.
So
I do.
How did that come about, and where did this love of giant monsters come from?
From a very specific set of circumstances, I think. So when I must have been like 4 or 5 years old, as somewhere around that age, in the mid '90s, and I loved dinosaurs. I was really obsessed with them. I could name them all. I had so many books about dinosaurs, and I went to Zellers one day with my babysitter, and Zellers is just a Canadian department store. Funnily enough, I've got a Zellers mug right here.
Nice.
And they had a bunch of toys for Godzilla. And I was looking at them and I didn't know what a Godzilla was. And I was like, I was talking to my babysitter, Sharon. I said, I don't recognize this dinosaur. What dinosaur is this? And she had grown up in Wales and I guess had watched all the Godzilla movies on TV. And so she was like, oh, that's not a dinosaur, Alex. That's Godzilla. And I was like, well, what's a Godzilla? And then she explained it to me, and this sounds the best thing ever. and I still have that. She bought me the Godzilla. I still have it here. It sits on my desk.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he's been through a lot.
I love it.
That sparked my love of kaiju, because after that it was okay. Well, I found all the Godzilla movies on videotape, or I rented them, or if I could, look through the TV guide listings and earmark them, and I couldn't get enough of them. And then eventually I watched all the Godzilla movies, so then I had to watch Gamera movies, and then I watched all of those, and then, well, okay, now I got to watch Ultraman, and of course King Kong, and all the giant monsters. So that was a really big part of my childhood. And then I think as well things like Pokemon and Digimon really just kind of further fueled that love, because I mean, in many ways those are just more kaiju. They're maybe not as big, but it's a lot of the same stuff. And but what I think has kind of kept my love of the genre is that as I got older and would rewatch these films, they had a lot more depth for, a teenage and adult audience than I expected, especially like the original Godzilla film, which is actually a pretty somber and harrowing film. But a lot of them have they've got a lot more to talk about than you would expect, thinking, oh, this is just about giant monsters. They talk about the Cold War, they talk about environmentalism, they talk about all these headier concepts. So, at a base level, it's really fun to look at the monsters, and then on a different level, it's like, oh, these are actually like well-made films that have something more to say than your usual pop culture media. And so, yeah, I still, every time there's anything new with giant monsters, I got to check it out. On my watch list is they just released a movie called Troll on Netflix, about a giant troll that appears in somewhere in Norway. It looks great. Apparently, it's getting really good reviews. But that's the next giant monster on my hit list.
I'll have to check that out. So I'm from Sweden and my wife's from Norway, so I'll put that on my list.
There you go.
Sure.
There you go. Actually, my what would it be? My grandmother, or I guess my great grandmother and great grandfather are from Sweden. I haven't
cool.
been there yet, but yeah, I've got some Swedish blood in me. Got to head back there.
Awesome. Yeah. No, it's a great place. Highly recommend visiting.
Yeah.
So the as I was playing Dawn of Monsters here, one thing that I really liked, again, adding more depth, not just the story, but then you have the archives as well within the game, where you can dive deeper into the lore. How did that come about? And was that to build on top of something? Was that to build on top of other beat 'em ups that were just straight left to right, beat everything, and then done? Did you was that planned from the beginning to have that archive in there?
That came from a number of kind of observations. So early on, when we knew we were going to make this game, I kind of led the team on a guided tour of the genre. We would have movie nights. This is pre-pandemic. We would have movie nights every week, and we would watch a monster movie or a TV show, and then we'd discuss it to try to understand our target audience. And one thing that I've always felt when it came to other, not necessarily other beat 'em ups, though, I mean, that could be the case, but other giant monsters, like there have been Godzilla games, Superman games, is that the only thing that they do a good job, and sometimes not even that great of a job of doing, is trying to create monster action. Sometimes they're pretty mindless, sometimes they're pretty simple, and it was always strange to me, because being in this fandom of giant monster movies for so long, people like these movies not just for giant monster fights, but because of the worlds that are built on screen, the characters that exist in them, and relationships between them. There's so much more than just monsters kicking the crap out of monsters. And I wanted to have that be apparent in the game, and that's part of the reason that it has an in-depth story. Is that that's a big part of any good kaiju franchise, is that I think someone put together some kind of chart that showed like the amount of screen time Godzilla has in every movie, and in some of them it's as little as 4 minutes. I think the biggest it gets is like 15 or 20 minutes, and these movies
Really?
are at least 90 minutes long, right? So like one of the longest running movie franchises ever, and they're not just releasing, monster fight compilations into theaters. People are watching them for way more than that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do that, but I also wanted to respect from an action game perspective. It can be kind of jarring when you're like, man, I'm having so much fun fighting, and then you have to like sit through minutes and minutes and minutes of cutscenes. So we wanted to have an element of the story that players could really invest in themselves and interact with. So that's where the archives come. If you're interested in learning about the lore and history of this world, all in there, and you're rewarded, if you dig into every archive file, there's stuff you're going to see in the game and in the dialogues, all sorts of stuff that you'll be like, oh, I know what that means, or I know what that is, or I understand something about that someone else might know. Because we think that kind of gives it a little bit of an interactive, gamey element. You can't really get that out of other forms of media.
Yeah.
So that was the idea behind it.
I really like digging into it because it's not just a monster compendium either. You have that, of course, so you can dig into the monsters that you fight, but you also have a ton of lore about all the other stuff as well. The energy source Sheol energy, and kind of explaining what they think it is and how they think it works, and I think it adds a lot. And I really like that you made that conscious decision of not forcing it upon the player, but people who wanted to dig into the lore can do so at their own time.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because we also wanted to feel like there's more to the game world than what you experience in the game. And so the writer for the game, the narrative director, his name's Unai. He had initially written, I think we had double or more than double what's actually apparent in the archives. So he constructed this whole history to this world. So even though you don't get all of it in the game, you can tell that there's links and hints to other things that are happening. We did release a little. It was a kind of tie-in promotional comic. It gives a little bit of a prelude to the game, because we always felt that we wanted to make something rich enough that we could potentially expand it into all sorts of other media.
One thing that I found, let me see if I can pull that up here. These images here, where you actually have like the anatomy of Megadon, who's the first character that you control, and just seeing this and seeing this in such detail, I just love this. So I'm a big fan of old black and white horror movies and monster movies as well. So just seeing something like this immediately caught my eye. I'm like, this is someone who definitely loves these movies and loves the genre. So this was really, really cool to see. I believe we also have one for Tempest Galahad, the robot kaiju. Do you call them kaijus if they're robots?
That's like a philosophical debate. I just call it a robot or a mecha.
Mecha might be a better term for it. Yeah. So these are two of the characters that you can play as, and so far I've experienced 4 characters. Is there more characters that you can play as throughout the game? Maybe that's spoilers.
Well, it's not yet. There's only the 4 in the base game, but there is a DLC expansion coming out next year, and that's going to include the 5th playable character, which is very much inspired by the Power Rangers Megazord. So,
ooh, interesting.
Yeah, we're pretty excited too. We held a poll so that our fans could choose who they wanted to be the next playable character, and this character won by a lot. So I've been playing around with it, like, you know, in this prototype version that I've been working on, and they're really fun to play. So I'm excited to release that.
Oh, that's awesome. So what were some of the when you looked into the fighting mechanics of the game here, what were some of the things that you what were some of the hurdles that you hit in some things that you overcame and eventually made the game better?
Well,
If you had any.
no, we definitely did. It's, you know, it was interesting when we first started Dawn of the Monsters. We started it a long time ago, and it wasn't Dawn of the Monsters. It was started in 2016. We created a prototype, and it was a fighting game. And it was actually, I don't know if you know the old Neo Geo game King of the Monsters.
Yep.
But it was supposed to be a King of the Monsters like 3.
Oh, cool.
And so we had built you know, movesets and all this stuff to create this fighting game prototype. And there are a lot of similarities between fighting games and beat 'em ups, but there are a lot of key differences as well. So when we decided to turn it into a beat 'em up, we wanted to carry over a lot of the depth, but we wanted to make it less complex so that players could just more easily hop in. But another thing we wanted to do that was really important to us and was a pretty significant challenge in terms of like the amount of work it took was to make each character play significantly differently from the other. So we made a lot of early calls. We are like, okay, Megadon's going to be our kind of more classic guy. He's going to be a brawler. He's going to have really heavy hits. And then we were like, okay, well, Tempest, for example, Tempest Galahad, we are like, she's going to use a gun. She's going to be a ranged beat 'em up character, which is not very common, even in the 3D beat 'em up.
I had a
So we
lot
were
of fun
like,
playing with Tempest, by the way.
I'm glad it was.
Yeah.
It was a challenge to get her to work in a way that it felt natural but unique, right? And I think that was a big challenge for a lot of the characters was to balance that. Tempest is probably the most complicated character to play, but once you click with her, you're like, wow, this is pretty unique in terms of this type of game. Ganira as well. With Ganira, we were like, well, we want a character that can summon another character, you know, that can use another character as part of their kit. And that was something that we were able to achieve. And then with Aegis Prime, we were like, we want something that's really fast and kind of targeting those Devil May Cry fans. Really quick combos and a lot of more technical, speedy skill and stuff like that. And like one of his moves is just cancels his animation and gives him a speed buff so that you can just immediately combo into something else. So yeah, I think the main challenge was making sure that the characters all felt very unique from each other. But in the same breath, if you're playing with a friend, none of them should be so complicated that you can't just have mash.
Yeah, they're definitely different enough, and the play style is very different for each of them, and it feels right. I definitely think that you hit the mark on all of them because they're really fun to play. They have vastly different play styles, but it's really fun just to mix it up. So I've been trying out all of them. And Tempest is definitely one of my favorite. Aegis, super fast. And I mean, Megadon is Megadon. So it's super cool, brawler, strong, super fun.
Yeah.
And Ganira is just really cool as well. And the was the shield bubble mechanic. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun to play and to try them out instead of being stuck with just essentially skins of different characters, but they're essentially the same. So this is really cool to just have 4 very different characters with very different play styles. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Yeah.
So what are you looking for when it comes to the future of Dawn of the Monsters? You said there's a DLC coming out next year.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about that, or is that under NDA still?
I can tell you a bit.
All right.
So the DLC, we're hoping to launch it like early next year, Q1, Q2, if all goes well. And it's going to be a mix of, there's going to be some free content. I think nowadays people call that a title update, which is a weird word to me, but sure, we'll call it that. Free DLC. We're giving some free DLC. And then we're also giving some paid DLC, which will include the new playable character named Meteor Temujin, which is the giant Megazord character, and some other content included in that paid DLC, like a brand new game mode. So I can't speak to the specifics of all the new content, but I will say that I guess one of the main pieces of feedback that we got from our players was, this game is really fun. We're really enjoying it. We wish that there was more. Like they were like, we just want to keep playing it and have more content. So that's what we're trying to address, is give way more content in a way that people can just keep playing it, trying new builds, new ideas, characters. So there's that. That we're really excited about. I think it's going to be really good, and I think it's going to make the whole package like really strong. But there's also something else that we're really excited about, is that in early next year, timing not 100% sure, we're going to be releasing the game in Japan. So it hasn't been released in Japan yet.
Ooh, cool.
And we're very excited about releasing it there because, I mean, it's made with a lot of love for Japanese movie monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to releasing it there, it's going to get its own physical version that people can import if they want, because it had a physical version through limited run here, but that's obviously sold out. So people missed out, they can grab it. And not only will it have all the English language, or all the language options from the original, it adds Japanese voice acting. So for those who really like their Japanese monster movies, you could play it in Japanese voice with English subtitles.
I love that.
And that applies. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And we'll be adding that as a free update to all versions.
So, that's awesome. That's awesome, because that's definitely my favorite way to play games from Japan, or games published in Japan. If they have Japanese voice acting and English subtitles, that's always my go-to. So that's awesome to hear. Yeah,
I'm pretty excited. It's one thing I really love about the Yakuza games. I guess they're not called that anymore, but like playing them in Japanese with English subs just feels right. I don't know, it just does.
Yeah, I'm actually playing Yakuza Kiwami 2 now in December, because it's a Christmas game. It's a holiday game.
It is. I didn't even think of it that way, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, they're all set in December, and they all have like Christmas trees in stores and things like that. So we're doing a little game challenge in the Hit Save Discord. So we're focused on holiday or winter games. So I chose that.
Awesome.
That's really cool. What was the reception like for the physical version that you released with limited run games?
It was great. I mean, people, surprisingly, at launch, I'd have to double check, but I feel like the physical outsold the digital by like a factor of like 4 times.
Oh wow.
Yeah, people really wanted it. I mean, it's a great package. Like the team at Limited Run made the standard physical is awesome. It's got a full color manual and stuff, but the collector's edition has an amazing box art that makes it look like a giant old VHS box. It's got collectible toys in it. It's got a whole bunch of really cool stuff. And that one hasn't shipped out yet, but I can't wait until it arrives. And it includes those anatomical drawings as like posters, and I pin them up on my wall.
Yeah, I'm looking at the information from Limited Run Games here, and it seems like I missed ordering that one, so I'll have to pick up the Japanese copy. This is really, really nice looking. This is really cool. The minifigure set and the anatomical drawings and everything. This is really cool.
Yeah, I think people, and maybe it's especially kaiju fans. I mean, they like having a physical memento of something. I mean, I have another side gig that I do. It's a company called Seismic Toys, and we released. See if I have one around here. We released these like giant soft vinyl toys of Megadon and Ganira.
Oh, cool!
And we released Megadon back in 2019, and like these are like, they're not. I wouldn't really say they're toys. They're like collector's items, right?
Yeah.
And so like this is like $125. They're $130, and Megadon sold out pretty quickly, even though the game wasn't out for another like 2 years.
That's funny.
So and right now we're doing we've got a makeship campaign. So that's like they make plushies, and basically it's kind of like Kickstarter. If we meet a certain order, then they make a bunch of plushies of Megadon. So we're doing that right now as well. And in August, we had a partnership with a ramen restaurant all around Ontario, where we had a special Megadon ramen that you could come in and get. It was this massive, like spicy, meaty ramen, and if you ordered one, you could enter into like a sweepstakes and get a free comic and stuff. It was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. That's hilarious. That's a really cool tie-in.
I like these kind of weird ideas and different concepts that, to me, they made sense with the idea, with the brand of Dawn of the Monsters. Like, what would a giant Japanese monster eat? Like a huge bowl of spicy ramen.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, to kind of wrap things up around Dawn of the Monsters here, what are you most focused on, and what are you most excited about for the future of Dawn of the Monsters and the DLC that's coming out and the community that's gathering around this game?
I mean, I know I can't talk much about it, but I'm really excited to see what people do with the new content we're giving them. Like, the character is a big thing. The new character is really, really fun. Like, it's always interesting. As a developer, you can kind of get a little tunnel visioned and think, I'll go into the combo lab and be like, yeah, I've probably figured out every combo that there is. And then some random person on Twitter will be like, oh, check out this Tempest Galahad combo I invented. And I was like, I didn't even know that was possible. So
Nice.
Meteor Temujin, so much potential for that kind of funny stuff. And I think the new game modes people will really dig, because they really are focused on being like, hey, this is something you can come back to over and over and over again. Experiment and try different things and post high scores. And so I'm just excited for the community to get their hands on that stuff. And I'm really excited to see how the Japanese audience reacts to the game and what they think.
Yeah, for sure. When is it releasing in Japan? Do you know?
I'm not 100% sure yet. I think it's quarter one or quarter two. Pretty soon.
I'll be on the lookout for sure. I import a bunch of things from Japan, so this is definitely something that I want to grab.
Yeah, it's funny. It's already up for pre-order on like Amazon Japan and Play Asia and stuff. I was like, oh, there it is.
Even better. Even better. I'll do that. That's awesome. So my final question here is, as an indie game developer and the CEO of an indie game studio, what are you most excited about for the indie game scene and the indie game community going forward?
That's a tricky question. I think what's exciting to me, in terms of where indie games are going, is seeing like the more that big companies are heading into purely games as a service, purely online multiplayer stuff. I'm excited to see indies pick up the slack where AAA's not interested anymore. Um, nostalgia is shifting away from the 80s into the 90s and the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we'll see indies taking on more games and genres than we've expected, and hopefully see a lot more indie teams grow into that like single A and double A space. Because I feel like the most exciting ideas in games for me right now are coming from small teams. And if those small teams can get the budgets to make like bigger 3D games, I feel like they'll just be really, really exciting and really fun. And kind of remind me of why I love video games.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more with you. I think what we're seeing from indies, coming out from indies, is just amazing. They're so vastly different. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So last thing here, how can people find you online? 13 AM Games online, Dawn of the Monsters online. Where can we find you?
So 13amgames.com is a great place to start. It's got links to our Twitter, links to our Discord. We've got a pretty active Discord. We've also got a mailing list that you can sign up for on the website if you're interested in hearing about future games and news and things like that. As for myself, I have a blog that I rarely update, but I'm hoping to change that over the winter break, called controlallmonsters.com. I've got my Twitter at Goji_guy. And then I've also got, of course, Seismic Toys and that website and Instagram and all that kind of stuff. I've got my fingers in a lot of pies, but typically if you follow me on Twitter, I'll kind of bring everything to that platform.
Fantastic. And I'm Jonas Rosland here with HitSave. You can find me at Jonas Rosland pretty much everywhere, and hitsave.org, and you'll find all the links to everything that we do. Thank you, everyone, for viewing this indie game interview with Alex Rushdy from 13AM Games and diving into Dawn of the Monsters. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.